I wasn't planning on becoming interstellar royalty adjacent that afternoon. I was planning on killing time, letting the sun cook my brain just enough to forget emails, bills, and the growing suspicion that my life had stalled somewhere between fine and what exactly am I doing? The water was calm, almost glassy, the kind that tricks you into thinking nothing unexpected ever happens here. That illusion lasted right up until something splashed where nothing should have splashed. At first I thought it was debris, or maybe someone doing a terrible job swimming. Then the water glowed. Not reflected sunlight, actual, faintly shimmering light, pulsing under the surface like a heartbeat. That's when panic kicked in, because my brain has a very clear rule. Glowing water usually means you should be running in the opposite direction. Unfortunately, my eyes registered a shape struggling beneath the surface before my common sense could grab the wheel. She broke the surface gasping, limbs flailing in a way that was very definitely not human swimming technique. Long, dark hair plastered itself to skin that shimmered like polished stone dusted with starlight. Her eyes, too bright, too focused, locked onto me with raw, unmistakable fear. "Hey, hey!" I shouted, already moving. I didn't think about aliens, laws, or how badly this could go. I just knew someone was drowning, and my body reacted the way it always had. Shoes off, shirt half torn, straight into the water. She was heavier than she looked, or maybe denser is the better word, like pulling a person wrapped in gravity. When I got my arms around her, she made a startled sound that was half gasp, half strange melodic click, fingers gripping my shoulders with far more strength than expected. For a split second, I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake. Then instinct took over again. I kicked, dragged, cursed under my breath, and hauled us both toward shallow water. When we collapsed onto the shore, I lay there coughing, lungs burning, staring at the sky while my heart tried to punch its way out of my chest. Beside me, she rolled onto her side and breathed in deep, steady pulls, the glow of her skin dimming as her panic faded. I turned my head just enough to check if she was alive, human, hostile, or about to eat me. Instead, she pushed herself up and looked at me like I'd just rewritten the laws of the universe. Up close, she was devastating. Not in a magazine cover way, but in a way that made your brain struggle to categorize what it was seeing. Her features were elegant but unfamiliar, too symmetrical, too deliberate. Water slid off her skin instead of soaking in. When she smiled, slow, stunned, reverent, I felt something dangerous twist in my chest. "You acted without hesitation," she said. Her voice wasn't strange the way movies promise alien voices will be. It was warm, musical, accented in a way that made every word sound intentional. Like she'd practiced speaking just for moments like this. I managed. "You're welcome?" She reached out and placed her hand over mine. Her touch was warm, grounding, sending a jolt straight up my arm. I was suddenly very aware that I was half-dressed, dripping wet, and holding hands with a glowing stranger who definitely wasn't from around here. "By the authority of my house," she continued, eyes shining, "I acknowledge you as my rescuer." "That's nice." I tried to pull my hand back. She didn't let me. "As stipulated under Life-Mate Preservation Statute," she said completely calmly, "your actions constitute a binding claim." I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was absurd. "Okay. That's a good one. You aliens really commit to the bit, huh?" Her smile softened, but her grip tightened just a fraction. "I am not joking." That's when the cold slid down my spine. She explained it slowly, patiently, like you would to a child or someone recovering from a head injury. On her world, water was sacred and dangerous, tied to lineage and ritual. To be saved from it, physically pulled from its grasp, was not just assistance. It was devotion. It meant the rescuer accepted responsibility for the rescued life. If the one saved was of royal blood, even minor, the act carried legal, cultural, and emotional weight. In other words, I hadn't just saved her. I'd proposed. Publicly. To the universe. "There has to be some kind of misunderstanding," I said, scrambling to my feet. "I mean, I didn't know. You can't just, this isn't how it works here." She stood as well, perfectly composed despite everything. Brushing sand from her clothes like this was the most natural conversation in the world. Intent is irrelevant. Action is truth. That's not comforting. Her eyes flicked over me, not appraising like property, but curious. Amused. You are honest, she said. And untrained. It is refreshing. Before I could respond, the air changed. A low hum vibrated through the ground, deep enough to rattle my bones. Lights flared in the distance, shapes descending with controlled precision. I stared, mouth open, as sleek, impossible structures settled nearby, figures emerging in coordinated motion. She turned toward them, posture shifting subtly, still warm, still gentle, but now undeniably important. When she looked back at me, there was something like gratitude in her expression. And something else. Choice. Do not be afraid, she said. You have done a noble thing. That's great, I replied weakly, watching alien officials march toward us. Because I'm absolutely terrified. She smiled again, and this time it felt personal. Good, she said softly. That means you understand the weight of what you've claimed. And standing there, soaked, stunned, and surrounded by a galaxy I hadn't known existed an hour ago, I realized my normal life had ended the moment I jumped into the water. If there's one thing alien processions are good at, it's making you feel underdressed, underqualified, and deeply concerned about your recent life choices. The figures approaching us moved with synchronized precision, their armor smooth and iridescent, their banners floating without wind. I glanced down at myself, wet hair, sand stuck to my legs, shoes dangling from one hand, and wondered if there was some universal law about dying from second-hand embarrassment. She noticed. Of course she did. You appear distressed, she said gently. I think that's just my face now, I replied. It does that when I accidentally marry royalty. Her lips curved in what I was quickly learning was her version of amusement. Minor royalty, she corrected. Please do not exaggerate. That's comforting. Truly. The first of the newcomers stopped a respectful distance away and lowered his head, not to me, but to her. He spoke rapidly in a language that flowed like music layered over mathematics. She answered with practiced ease, her posture subtly changing again, spine straighter, chin lifted. The warmth was still there, but now it was wrapped in authority. Then they all turned and looked at me. I felt like a raccoon that had wandered into a Senate chamber. The translator came next, hovering discreetly near my ear. Human individual, it said in a pleasant, neutral tone. You are acknowledged as the rescuing party. By statute, you are provisionally recognized as consort candidate. I don't like how official that sounds, I said. That is a common response, the translator replied. Congratulations. They ushered us, mostly her, technically me, into one of the craft. The interior was elegant and terrifying, all smooth curves and shifting light panels that reacted when she walked past. I kept my hands firmly at my sides, afraid touching anything would trigger another lifelong obligation. As we traveled, she finally explained it properly. Her house governed a small but influential territory. Not enough to rule, but enough to matter. Her role wasn't ceremonial fluff. Alliances hinged on her future bond. A life mate was expected to embody stability, strength, and this part she said with a teasing glance, emotional competence. I'm doomed, I muttered. You underestimate yourself, she said. You dove into unknown water for a stranger. That is considered a rare virtue. On my planet, it's called not being a jerk. When we arrived, things got worse. Much worse. The reception hall was enormous, filled with dignitaries whose outfits made my borrowed alien robe, apparently mandatory, feel like a bath towel wrapped by a drunk friend. I tried to stand where everyone else stood, bowed when they bowed, and smiled when smiling seemed safe. It was not safe. At one point, I bowed too deeply and accidentally mirrored a gesture reserved for sworn enemies. Gasps rippled through the hall. She leaned over and whispered, Do not worry. That one deserved it. Later, I used the wrong title when addressing a council member and apparently implied his lineage came from ornamental fish. He looked offended. She looked delighted. "You are causing chaos," she murmured, eyes sparkling. "I'm trying my best not to start a war." "But you are," she said warmly. "Just a small one. In my favor." That's when it hit me. This wasn't just tolerance. She wasn't embarrassed by me. She was enjoying this. Enjoying how unpolished I was, how I didn't maneuver, didn't flatter, didn't pretend to be something I wasn't. Every time I spoke plainly, every time I admitted confusion instead of hiding it, her attention sharpened. During a formal inquiry, a counselor asked me why I believed myself worthy of standing beside her. I opened my mouth to deflect, joke, or apologize, and stopped. Everyone was watching, including her. "I don't," I said honestly. "Not by your standards. I don't know your customs. I don't know your politics. All I know is that someone was drowning, and I didn't want her to die. If that's not enough, then I guess that's your answer." Silence followed. Heavy. Dangerous. Then she laughed. A clear, unrestrained sound that echoed through the chamber like rebellion. "That," she said, stepping closer to me, "is precisely why he is enough." Later, when the officials finally withdrew to argue about clauses and precedent, we were left alone on a balcony overlooking a city that looked like starlight poured into architecture. I leaned against the railing, exhausted. "So," I said, "any chance this whole consort thing has a return policy?" She joined me, close enough that I could feel her warmth. "You are afraid of being claimed. I'm afraid of messing up your life." She turned to face me fully. "My life has been decided for me since birth. You are the first variable." I swallowed. That felt heavy. Real. "You don't have to like this," I said quietly. She smiled, softer now, something unguarded in her eyes. "I already do." And for the first time since I'd pulled her from the water, I stopped thinking entirely about how to escape, and started wondering what staying might actually mean. The next morning, I discovered that being a human consort candidate wasn't just about showing up. It was about participating. Enthusiastically. Publicly. And apparently in ways that involved a level of cultural understanding I didn't possess and had absolutely no manual for. The first ritual alone nearly had me tripping over my own feet while simultaneously offending a small group of ambassadors, 2 ceremonial creatures, and a decorative fountain. I would have panicked entirely if it weren't for her steady hand guiding mine, her eyes full of amusement and a strange kind of pride. Somehow, my total incompetence delighted her. The ritual itself was absurd. It involved moving through a sequence of gestures I couldn't possibly memorize, making sounds that weren't quite words but weren't quite music, and offering symbolic gifts whose significance I barely understood. At one point, I was supposed to bow in a particular way while emitting a tone that, if done incorrectly, could imply eternal servitude to someone else. I did it wrong. The alien audience tittered politely. She leaned close, whispered a single word in my ear, and I somehow recovered with an improvised flourish that earned genuine applause. I had no idea whether that counted as successful, but she clapped the loudest and smiled at me like I'd won something monumental. By the time the second ritual rolled around, I was exhausted, dripping sweat in an elegant outfit that was far too tight in all the wrong places. The ritual required walking on water, or, more accurately, on a reflective platform that mimicked water, while balancing a glowing orb and reciting a declaration of emotional honesty. The orb kept wobbling, my steps were unsteady, and the declaration came out sounding like a mix of a dramatic Shakespearean speech and a confused grocery list. Yet, every time I faltered, she was there, gently correcting, lightly teasing, occasionally laughing in that musical way that made my stomach twist. Somehow, in my ridiculous failures, I was earning her trust, and apparently the approval of an entire alien council. The third ritual, which I was certain would be the last, involved public disclosure of intent, a demonstration of mutual respect, and what they called emotional synchronization. I had no idea what that meant, and neither did anyone else watching me flounder through it. We were surrounded by alien dignitaries, citizens, and what I could only assume were distant relatives who had the legal right to glare at me on behalf of the family. I was sweating in places I didn't know existed, repeating a pledge in a language that sounded like a bird trying to recite a poem while hopping on hot coals. And then she reached for my hand, and everything became somehow simpler. She looked at me, and I could feel the absurdity of the ceremony fade into the absurdity of my own emotions. I realized in that moment that the rituals weren't really about the gestures, the orbs, or even the language. They were about honesty. Vulnerability. Showing up, even when you didn't know what you were doing and were terrified of failure. And, as I glanced at her, I noticed that while the council members observed my every stumble, her expression was one of pure delight. She wasn't concerned with mistakes, she was concerned with me showing up as myself, unpolished, earnest, and completely human. And I had to admit, it was strangely intoxicating. When the last ritual concluded, she leaned close and whispered in a tone that made my heart trip over itself. "You are chaotic, untrained, and emotionally unpredictable. But I would not trade it for 100 perfect consorts." I had no idea how to respond, so I did the only thing that felt right. I smiled, probably too nervously, and shrugged. She laughed softly, brushing a strand of damp hair from my face. The sound was like a melody I wanted to hear again and again. It was absurd, it was terrifying, and it was somehow perfect. That night, we walked through the alien city, her presence a gentle anchor beside me. The buildings glowed with a soft light, and the streets hummed with activity unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Everywhere we went, there were subtle reminders of the rituals, the ceremonies, and the people who had watched me fumble through it all. And yet, despite the chaos and the weight of cultural expectation, I felt an unexpected calm. Because she was beside me. Laughing at my mistakes, cheering my accidental triumphs, and choosing me for reasons that had nothing to do with protocol, politics, or even law. She chose me because I had been honest, because I had acted without pretense, because I had shown up when it mattered most. We paused on a balcony overlooking the city's central plaza, where alien citizens had gathered to witness some late-night ceremonial display I was too exhausted to understand. She leaned close, brushing her shoulder against mine, and whispered, "You are not what we expected. You are more." I wanted to protest, to tell her that I was barely holding it together, that I had no idea how any of this worked. But I couldn't. Because she was right. In my own messy, human way, I had managed to show courage, care, and emotional presence, and she had noticed. And that, apparently, was worth more than centuries of training and perfection. By the time we returned to the palace, I realized I wasn't exhausted anymore. I was exhilarated. Terrified, yes, but exhilarated. I had been dragged into alien customs, subjected to rituals that made my brain ache, and publicly humiliated more times than I could count. And yet, every step of the way, she had been there, steady, amused, patient, and somehow entirely mine in the sense that mattered. I didn't know what the future held, whether politics, law, or tradition would complicate our lives further. But in that moment, as I stumbled into the palace halls, glowing skin, laughter in her eyes, and my own heart pounding like a drum in my chest, I understood one thing clearly. I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The council convened the next morning in a chamber that felt impossibly vast, every wall lined with observers, every surface gleaming with alien craftsmanship designed to make humans feel small and awkward. I stood at the center, still wet from the previous day's rituals despite assurances that the palace staff would take care of such things, and tried to look dignified. It was a hopeless endeavor. Every muscle in my body screamed, every nerve protested, and yet I was expected to deliver some kind of declaration that would determine the course of my life, and apparently, hers as well. The alien officials spoke in rapid-fire sequences I could barely parse, voices flowing like water over stones. She translated quietly into my ear, each word a lifeline of calm in the chaos. "They question your suitability," she said. "Not as punishment, but as protocol." I wanted to say something clever, something that would charm the room and make this all go away. Instead, I froze. My mind raced through every possible excuse, apology, and joke I could muster. I even considered feigning fainting, figuring that collapsing dramatically might count as an emotional display of authenticity. But no, they would see right through it, and she would probably scold me for trying to avoid responsibility. Finally, I took a deep breath, channeling every ounce of human stubbornness and honesty I could muster. "I don't belong here," I said, voice echoing oddly against the high walls. "I'm not trained, I don't know your rules, I don't understand your politics. I saved her because she was drowning. That's it. If that's not enough for you, then I accept your judgment." Silence. Every eye in the room turned toward her, waiting. And then she stepped forward, radiant and calm, her gaze never leaving mine. "He is enough," she said simply. "He is honest, brave, and unafraid to show his true self. He did not act for reward, recognition, or prestige. He acted because it was right. That is the essence of a life mate." A murmur ran through the chamber. I wasn't sure if it was approval, confusion, or shock at her blunt defiance of protocol. I didn't care. Because in that moment she had chosen me, not because of law, tradition, or politics, but because she had seen me, in all my messy, untrained human glory, and decided that I mattered. The council debated briefly, but her declaration carried weight no one could ignore. When the final decision was announced, I realized I was officially recognized as her consort. Not just legally, but emotionally, ceremonially, and in every way that mattered. I was hers, and she was mine, regardless of the intricacies of alien law that I still barely understood. After the ceremony, we walked through the palace gardens. The air was fragrant with alien flora, colors shifting in ways that made my human brain dizzy. She reached out, took my hand, and squeezed it gently. "You survived the rituals, the council, and my expectations," she said with a teasing lilt. "You are officially my life mate. Congratulations." I laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. "I'm not sure I survive you every day," I admitted. "You're terrifying and brilliant and radiant. I almost drowned once, and somehow ended up in courtrooms, rituals, and a galaxy of bureaucracy I can't pronounce. And yet here we are." She leaned close, brushing her forehead against mine. "Here we are," she echoed softly. "And I would not have it any other way. You are honest, spontaneous, and untrained. You are human, and that is exactly what makes you perfect." We wandered through the gardens, hands intertwined, the glow of alien bioluminescence reflecting off her skin and casting strange shadows over my own. For the first time, I felt like I belonged somewhere other than the corner of my apartment, or the unremarkable stretch of beach I had called home. I belonged here, beside her, in this chaotic, beautiful, incomprehensible world. Later, as we watched the twin moons rise over the city, she leaned against my shoulder, calm and confident, while I marveled at the fact that my life had changed entirely in a single, unplanned afternoon. From a casual swim to being claimed under lifemate law by minor royalty, every step had been absurd, terrifying, and exhilarating. "Do you ever think about normal life?" I asked quietly. She laughed softly. "I no longer know what that means," she replied. "But I know this is right. And I know us." I smiled, resting my head against hers. "Then I guess I can live with that. Royalty, rituals, and all." Her laughter rang into the night, and I realized that despite the absurdity, the chaos, and the endless unknowns, I had never felt more alive, or more human, than I did in that moment. And if the galaxy ever needed proof that humans could be courageous, honest, and perfectly unpolished, all I had to do was glance at her, and she would be standing there, radiant and patient, proud that she had chosen someone who simply acted with his heart. And somehow, that was more than enough.